wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we have the most amazing interview with Dr Anita Johnston, who wrote Eating in the Light of the Moon.
Oh, it's just magic.
It was such an impactful book for me. And Bridget, you have found it to be just inspiring and getting waves of tears and brought back to such a deep, bone resonating feminine truth, isn't it?
There is so much in this. And you know, on the surface, it might seem like it's a book about eating disorders or sort of dieting, but it is there. The depth in which this book asks you to go to your feminine and to listen to the stirrings of your soul is profound. I think if we were to have a recommended reading list, this has to be on it.
Oh, totally.
Yes.
So before we kick in, we'd just love to read you Dr. Anita Johnston's bio so you can get a bit of context.
Yeah. Anita Johnston, Ph.D, is a psychologist and author of Eating in the Light of the Moon, which has been published in 6 languages. She is the co-creator of the Light of the Moon Cafe, which offers online self-study courses and also interactive women's support circles and courses for eating in the light of the moon. She has been working in the field of women's issues and eating difficulties for over 35 years and is a thought leader in understanding the archetypal feminine as it relates to struggles with eating and body image. She is currently the clinical director of Ipono, Hawaii, which has a residential program on Maui and outpatient eating disorder programs in Honolulu and the Big Island of Hawaii. Dr. Johnston provides individual consultations online and conducts soul hunger workshops and professional trainings around the world using metaphor and storytelling, along with her training as a clinical psychologist, to address the complex issues that underlie struggles with eating, weight, and body image. You can find her at anitajohnston.com, and we'll put, of course, all of those links in the show notes as well.
Yes, dranitajohnston.com.
That's right.
And lightofthemooncafe.com, and they will be all in the show notes. And I just want to apologise up front that I'm a little bit like in awe and I fumble over my words and I get these rises in blood pressure. I'm like, oh my God. It's all just a bit too much. So I just want to apologise in advance for my very girlish, maiden-like archetype to which I bring to this interview, which is pretty much the opposite of where I wanted to sit with it.
Yeah.
But here we are, busting our own sense of self, which is magic anyway.
Yeah, and we really hope there's so much in here for you, because we could have, honestly, as we said to Anita, we could have talked for hours. So this is really just the embodiment of this amazing conversation with this incredible woman.
So welcome, Dr. Anita Johnston. We're so excited to have you here, author of Eating in the Light of the Moon, which was honestly one of my most favourite books, and I recommended it to our tribe, and it's just gone gangbusters within our tribe. So we're so incredibly excited that you have said yes to us and taken this moment out of your life to spend a bit of time with us answering some questions that we had. So thank you and welcome.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's really one of my favorite things to do, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, tell us about you and how you've journeyed into creating what you have and becoming who you are.
Okay, well, I've been doing it a long time now, so I have to go way back. And I think really how it started is I was born on the island of Guam, and I grew up in a very strong matrilineal culture and family, and so I was always interested in women's issues, and that was something that I explored. Eventually, I went to school to become a psychologist and did my doctoral dissertation on ethnic identity of Chamorro women, because those are the indigenous people of Guam where I'm from. And so I've always been interested in women's issues, and that led me to eating difficulties and body image, because that seemed to be the most pervasive. And I became very curious about that. And so that's really become my life's work, and I love it. It continues to fascinate me.
That sounds like a soul purpose to me. I'm just fascinated. When you say you grew up in a matrilineal culture and you became fascinated by women's issues, what does that look like? What does that mean? What is the difference between how you perceive you grew up based on how we grow up now?
Well, I only got fragments of it, okay, because the Chamorro culture on Guam was matrilineal. But then we had a couple hundred years of Spanish rule. And then after the Spanish-American War, we became a part of America. And so each time the patriarchal culture became a little more entrenched, and to the point where eventually you took the last name through the male line. But the remains of it seemed to be still very strong. Certainly, the language was passed down through the mother line, which is why the Chamorro language, was able to continue. And then in my particular family, my grandmother was a very strong figure. She was a Chamorro woman who married an American man. And then during World War II, when the Japanese occupied the island for 3 years, she led the underground resistance because my grandfather was taken away to put in a concentration camp. And so I grew up with those stories of this is what women did. And so I thought, okay, this is what women do. And it just seemed natural to me until I started realizing, there's lots of places and there's lots of ways women's empowerment is profoundly discouraged. And so that just became a real curiosity for me. I couldn't help myself to try to figure it out, and also to a certain extent resist it. Say, no, this is not real. This is not true. This is not healthy.
There's something in your book about when you talk about this centuries and centuries of feminine repression, that really when you listen to it or read it, it creates like that stirring within. You really feel it, that speaks to the spirit, because I think on some level we feel that, don't we?
Yes. It's inside of us, because what I tapped into and what I continue to try to tap into is the archetypal feminine. And an archetype is a term created by Carl Jung. And basically what he said is that just like we have genes for our bodies, GENES, not blue jeans, right? But genes that we inherit, archetypes are to the psyche what genes are to the body. You're born with them. But now we know with epigenetics that most genes are not fixed. There's very few that are actually fixed, maybe the color of your eyes or your height or something like that. But most genes, before you experience them, they have to be expressed. So, for example, you could inherit the breast cancer gene, but you will not get breast cancer unless that gene gets expressed. And it can get expressed either internally or externally. So it could be either externally, like exposure to a toxin, or internally, like some kind of emotional distress. So it is the same with archetypes. But what happens with archetypes is they get quickened. And so I wasn't aware of that when I wrote the book 25 years ago, but I recognize now that what I was doing was quickening that feminine archetype. There's a certain energetic signature to it, so that when we hear it, and I'm talking about hearing it with the inner ear, there's a certain vibration that we recognize, and it starts to just kind of move through us. And they say, for example, that a bird cannot sing its song until it hears it first. And so I think what's happening now with the feminine is it's being quickened in men and in women. But because women are the embodiment of the feminine, we feel it in our bones. We feel it in our womb, right? We there's a kind of recognition that I think we have access to a little more quickly, simply because we have that body.
Maybe this is a good time to ask you a question that I had here, which is, within your book, you focus on the polarities of feminine and masculine. Mm-hmm. And I wondered why you felt this was really important for women to know and understand.
Well, because when you grow up in a patriarchal culture, what the patriarchy is it's really not just men, okay? It's the masculine principle dominating the feminine principle. So when I'm talking about principles, I'm talking about a kind of, and it's a polarity that exists within all of us, regardless of your gender. It's in Asian cultures, it's called yin and yang. I use the terms masculine and feminine because coming from the Jungian tradition, the Jungians work a lot with dreams. And so in dreams, the feminine principle is expressed symbolically through the form of a female and the masculine principle through the form of a male. So I kind of stick with those terms because I speak English, I guess, and for lack of another structure. But what happens is we live in a culture where the masculine principle, and that's the part of ourselves that is logical, linear, goal, achievement-oriented, which is a fabulous part of ourselves, right? Dominates the feminine principle, which is the emotional, the intuitive, the instinctual, the relational part of ourselves. And so what has happened then is we have internalized that. And so if you are the embodiment of the feminine principle and you've internalized this imbalance, you really suffer in terms of your self-esteem because you consider the feminine less valuable. And men suffer as well, by the way, because anyone who is disowning their emotions or their instincts or their intuitions or devaluing their relationships suffers. But we're still encouraged to do that. And so I think it's important to recognize it consciously, because when it comes into consciousness, you can make a choice.
I love that explanation. Thank you. I wondered also why your fascination with eating disorders and why you've ended up focusing so much of your life's work there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Other than because I did not have an eating disorder myself, but I should have. I have the right personality, and but I think it's because of the way I grew up. So I just missed the whole dieting wave, and in fact, I wasn't sure because Guam was a little behind everybody else. Thank goodness. So I was getting together with a girlfriend of mine, and we grew up in the 50s and 60s, and on Guam. And I said, I don't know if this is my imagination, but I don't remember our mothers dieting. I don't remember dieting being a thing. She goes, no, my mom didn't diet. So that wasn't the thing. Now, my younger sisters did not escape this, but I did. So I think that I grew up in a very different era, I guess, if you will. And when I became a teenager, that's when Twiggy came on board. And so there was, but it didn't impact me in the same way.
You already had a foundation there.
I think so. Yeah.
Why also is story important? Obviously, throughout your book, you use story as a way of entering a topic and through metaphor. And it's so beautiful because I just found myself completely and totally captivated. And it's like you then come back through the story by pulling out the points to make, and you go, oh my gosh, yes. So tell me how you came to story and why story is important.
Again, I grew up with it, but so I didn't realize it was sort of like, trying to describe water to a fish, right? I didn't realize that a lot of my teachings were through story. So I grew up in a multicultural household, and I had many mothers. And one of my mothers was Candida, this little Filipina lady. And the way she taught us morals was through story. She would just tell us these stories. And they were like, kind of like the Filipino version of Aesop's tales, I guess. And so then when my children went to school, I raised two daughters, and when they were young, they went to Waldorf schools. I think you might call them Steiner schools. And so everything was taught through storytelling, and they would come home and they would say, oh, today we learned about Prince division and Prince multiplication, and this is what they did. And I went, oh my gosh, if I had learned my times tables that way, I'd probably know them today, right? And so then as I started working with eating disorders, I started realizing, okay, these are really complex issues that I'm trying to communicate. And I started just telling stories to help them understand what I was talking about. Because when you're talking about things that are invisible, storytelling can really help. And so that's how it started. And then when I wrote Eating in the Light of the Moon, there weren't that many stories in it. There were a handful of stories, but I had used some poems and different things, and my editor said, no, I want more stories. And I went, oh, great, where am I going to find the stories to go with these concepts? And so what I would do is I would go to the library, the children's section, and honestly, sometimes a book would just fall off the shelf onto my foot. And I'd pick it up and I go, what's this? Oh, okay, I see this. And so then what happened is I began to hunt. And I would look for stories that spoke to me. If something resonated within me, I could feel it. I could go, oh. And then I started realizing, wow, these old stories, they're coded. Because, back in the day, women were burned at the stake for their wisdom, right? So, and not only that, it wasn't until several hundred years ago that they could even read. So a lot of information was passed down in story and it was coded. And I started to notice, oh, look, the number 3 keeps popping up. There's always 3 tasks, 3 princes, 3 golden apples, whatever. And so then when I started looking, I went, oh, this is a signal. This is a signal where they're letting you know there's important information here. Take a second look. But you have to take a second look with your insight, right? Your inner eyes, not to really get a sense of, okay, what is it? There's something important here. What is it they're trying to say? So this excites me, as you can tell, and so I've just stayed with it.
Oh, I think that's magic.
It is magic.
I just wanted to read a short paragraph from your book, and then I'd just love you to expand in any way you feel called upon that.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who is addicted to eating is actually starving on a spiritual and emotional level. Her longing for food is a longing for emotional and spiritual nourishment. It is often a longing for the ideal mother, the archetypal good mother who nourishes us, soothes us, and loves and accepts us just as the way that we are. Frequently, this is the something she searches for as she stands in front of the fridge.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because what I've noticed was that people who are struggling with any kind of eating difficulty, they have a hunger, but typically the hunger is for mothering, which is archetypal, which is a verb, not a noun, not a thing, not a person. But, we live in a culture that's so literal that we feel the stirrings of that. And so we might turn to our biological mother, thinking, okay, I need to be nurtured or comforted or soothed. And maybe we find them lacking in some way, or maybe our mother is dead, or maybe she just doesn't know how to do it, or maybe she doesn't do it the way we want it, or there's any gazillion things that could go wrong, right? So that we don't get that soothing and that nurturing, and because it's a state of being. It's an energetic. It's not a thing. But we don't know that, right? So we reach for the concrete, physical symbol of mothering energy, which is food. And it's no wonder that is why we would do that, because if you think our first experience on the planet of being in distress, right? We're given the breast or the bottle. And so right there, that gets connected for us, because then we go, oh, yeah, we feel that state of being soothed and comforted. So, but because we grew up in a literal world, we don't recognize that that's an archetypal, energetic state of being that we can access in a lot of different places, and we get stuck. So it's a hunger that, again, we're not given a lot of, certainly, words to describe the different kinds of hungers we experience. And so we assume it's a hunger for food, which then can terrify us, because that seems like a bottomless pit.
Yeah, what really spoke to me from the perspective of, going into it, I haven't experienced either like you, any eating disorders or dieting kind of issues. So I really read the book with an open mind as to what is there in this for me, and there is so much beyond, this topic of eating disorders, because it is about the hunger, and you really call us to tap into the hunger of the feminine and to listen to the stirring of the spirit. Was that really your objective too? Was to make it relevant to all women?
That was my objective. It was a little subversive, right? I understood, okay, this is a portal through which I can go through. But I remember my sister saying, Anita, this book's not about eating disorders. I said, yeah, I know. But it was like, how, remember, I started writing this 25 years ago. I really didn't quite know how to proceed. And since it was, showing up in the women that I was working with, and I wanted them to understand that, I wrote the book with them in mind. But no, I because you see, I don't even believe in eating disorders anymore. Certainly I understand that they can be very dangerous and that people die, and I take that very seriously, which is why I have treatment centers to treat that. But really, as you said, it's about hunger. And it's about hunger for the feminine principle in many different ways. One of my very favorite workshops that I do is the 4 faces of the feminine, which has to do with the maiden and the mother and the queen and the crone, because these are archetypal energies that are available to us regardless of our age. Mothering energy is important to anyone who wants to create and nurture a book, a project, an adventure. So it's an important facet of the feminine that, again, because we grew up in the patriarchy, a lot of us have missed out on recognizing that, or even knowing how to access it and use it for our own personal or spiritual growth.
I just had another part of your book, which is to do really mostly with women's sensuality and sexuality, that I found really fascinating. And it's a 2-part question, but I'll start with part 1 and then you take it wherever you want to go. So what I wondered was, you posed this question of what happened to the girls who dreamed of becoming mermaids. Why are we frightened or repulsed by our sexual nature? Why do we reject the most womanly aspects of our womanly bodies? Now, part 2 is of this question, and then would you like me to read that, or would you like to just roll with that first question?
We'll go with the second, and then we'll see
where it takes us. That compulsive eating or starvation may become a way to distract ourselves from our feelings. Why is a woman's sexuality or sexual story part of this? So the sentence I have here is, again, food may be a way to insulate, hide, or suppress her sexuality. Or she may begin to diet in a vain attempt to reclaim the girlish body that no one noticed, that caused her no problems. So I guess with both of these, I find it a really fascinating underpinning in terms of, which is certainly what Bridget and I believe, that there's so much of how we emerge into this world as women and our sexuality that is suppressed, repressed, or, ill-expressed, let's say, that seems to depend so much on this hunger. And I would just so love you to take this wherever you like to go.
Okay. We're thrown into the deep end, right? Where we have to swim as best we can, because there's very little support for that. Remember that the components of the feminine principle are emotions, intuitions, instincts, right? So our sexual instincts are powerful and beautiful, but the whole world is afraid of feminine sexuality, right? We've got governments terrified. We've got religions, men, women, all of us. We're so scared of it because it's probably the most powerful force on the planet, right? The power to create life. Are you kidding me? To sustain it? It's awesome. But because it's been, people are too afraid of it, so none of us are taught how to handle it, right? If you're lucky, you get some, superficial sexual education at school. That mostly, again, because it's the patriarchy, is all about how girls need to squash their sexuality so that boys won't get distracted from their studies, right? That's why we have dress codes. It's like, wait, what is that about? So you can see how none of us, and sure, it's easy to blame our mothers and say, well, why didn't they? Or why did they say this? Or it's like, well, whoa, they had it worse than we did. And so it's almost like, and then you see those that'll just grab it. It's like grabbing a sword by the blade, right? It's like, well, I'm taking this on, and then getting wounded, or it's like, there's so little support for this, and I really don't have answers. I grew up in this culture. I'm doing the best I can too by questioning this. But I was in Greece. I did a retreat to Greece a couple of years ago. And we stumbled upon, as we were getting ready to do the retreat, we stumbled upon this temple. And I thought, well, what's this? It was just out in the nowhere. And it was the temple for Artemis, where all the young girls from Athens came for their coming of age ceremony, and for them to learn all the joys of being a woman and embracing their sexuality and embracing pleasure. I was astounded. It's like, wow, imagine if we had that, right? It would be nothing like camp, right? Okay, now I'm going to camp, right? It's like, no, this is like profoundly sacred way of addressing sexuality. And so that, again, so that it's in your bones. This is beautiful and precious, not dirty and scary, right? It'd be handled not just by the girls, but by everyone as the awesome thing that it is. And so I'm fascinated by this. I see that a hunger for sexual expression is one of the hungers that people try to deal with through eating difficulties. Certainly, it affects negative body image, right? If coming into puberty and you've been shamed for that, and frankly, most of us have, right? Imagine, just think about when you were young and you just started your period and you're wearing white and it bled through. Oh my God, the shame. It's like, wait. Why aren't we in awe of this? Why are we scurrying and trying to hide it? And, they say there's two kinds of secrets, those that are sacred and those that are shameful. And I believe in the absence of something being treated as though it's sacred, it becomes shameful. And there you go, right?
I'm just curious, how did this influence how you brought your own daughters into their coming of age?
Pretty profoundly. So when my oldest daughter was going into 5th grade, I decided I wanted, take that back. Much younger. I wanted my girls to have a different understanding of their menstrual cycle. So I tried to find a fairy tale that I could tell them because they were young, right? I knew that the culture was going to get to them very early on. So I tried to find a fairy tale that would explain it, and I couldn't. So I wrote the story myself. And I remember when I was driving my car and the story came, and I tried to drive and write at the same time. And so it was a fairy tale about what it means and the power that comes with getting a menstrual cycle. And so when I remember my younger daughter she was around 4, and I'd already told the girls the story multiple times, and she walked into the bathroom and I had my period, and she said, "Oh, Mommy, are you in your moon time?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You're in your power time?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Am I going to get this?" And I said, "Yeah, all girls get this when they get older." And she said, "You mean my power is inside of me waiting to come out?" I went, wow. Yay! Now, to all you mothers, though, don't get too excited, because I'll tell you, fast forward, right? So then when my older daughter was in 5th grade, I started doing mother-daughter teas for the 5th grade class with all the girls, and I would invite their mothers, and my girlfriend and I would put together these elaborate tea parties with our Battenberg lace tablecloths from our mothers and our Laura Ashley tea sets, and we made cookies, new moons for the girls and full moons for the moms, and we put on classical music, and everyone dressed in their Sunday best, and we served these cookies, and then I told that story. And after I told the story, we did a guided imagery where the mothers got to remember the day of their first cycle. And the girls got to imagine, because this is just 5th grade, how they would like to spend that day for themselves. And then afterwards, we pass around a bowl of rose petals where the mothers tell their story. The girls don't want to talk because they're sitting around the table, mother, daughter, mother, daughter, mother, daughter, mother. And the girls pass on that rose petal because they're still in that kind of silly, giggly thing. But then when the mothers speak and when they start to share their stories, we enter sacred space. Because the Japanese woman talks about how the rice was served red at the dinner table. And some of the women's stories were sad, some were scary, some were funny. And the Korean woman talks about how they collected a special cotton for the pads. And the Jewish woman tells about the slap. And all of a sudden, the girls realize, whoa, they're part of something bigger that they ever imagined. And they're not burdened if their mother had a very scary or painful, difficult first menstrual period. So at this point, now I've got them, right? It's like, okay, now we're in sacred space. And then I have them divide up into just mothers and daughters facing each other. And the girls don't, the mothers don't get to speak, only the girls. And they get to tell their moms how they want to spend the first day of their cycle. So over the years, I did this for like 7 years. It was a labor of love. And I had mothers write me letters years later that said, you know, and they were some of the mothers I was kind of afraid of. They grew up in fundamental Christian households. So I thought, whoa, I might be treading on, you know, areas that might offend them, but they were typically the moms that would write to me and they would say thank you, because that opened the door for us to talk about sexuality, and I don't know how that door would ever have been opened otherwise. And so now fast forward, when my daughters, you know, I would have them, you know, choose how they wanted to spend the day, and my older daughter, she just wanted to sit under a plumeria tree, which was where all her pets had been buried over the years. It was kind of a little sacred place to her, and bring all her stuffed animals and eat an orange. That's what she wanted, so that's what we did. Well, my younger daughter, the one that had said, oh, is it my power time? When it came her time, she was, Mom, I don't want anything. I don't want a party. Mom, I don't want anything. And I honored that as well. So, you know, we have to let them have their way with it, but we can introduce this to them so that they have ideas that are beyond what the culture is going to offer up, because what the culture offers up is not really nourishing.
So many goosebumps as you were telling that story. That was magic. Mm-hmm. Sorry, let me just get back in the zone now. I've totally got out of it. So I did just have one question, sort of coming full circle back to where we were. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about why is it that we reject the most womanly aspects of our womanly body, mm-hmm. it is a very kind of counterculture to really embrace the roundness of our human form. How is it that you would say to women to start embracing their roundness, or find beauty where they've never found beauty, or perhaps even have, you know, found incredible pain or hatred? How is it that you perceive women could begin this process of wanting to and desiring to love what it is that makes them sacredly and wholly feminine?
Get involved in a women's circle. And if you don't know of one, create it. And if it's only 2 of you, fine. If it's 3 of you, fine. I've been a part of a women's circle, it's been over 25 years now. And we would meet every new moon. And we went through births and deaths and divorces. I don't get to go so frequently because I no longer live in Hawaii all the time. But I was there's always a new moon. So just 2 weeks ago, I was in Hawaii. It was a new moon, and I got to gather with the women that I've been with for it feels like eons. And we support each other in that. And then I didn't know if it was possible, but I'm happy to say it is, created Women's Circle online, and that's what the Light of the Moon Cafe is. And we gather in circle every day. There's something, and we have a forum, and we communicate, and we create a space that is the antidote to the nonsense that's out there in the culture. And we can do this. We can do this because, remember, a big aspect of the feminine principle is relationship and connection. And so when we can connect in that way and fully support each other, magic happens. And part of the magic is learning to love and embrace your body in ways you never thought possible. And because, the patriarchy says, well, lose a few pounds, get a six-pack, buns of steel, thighs that don't touch. That's how you love your body. And it's like the biggest crock of BS, because it'll never happen that way. And when women come together, they reflect back to each other all different kinds of beauty, the diversity, just like, you're with a whole bunch of different dogs. Nobody just says, why is that St. Bernard so big? It should be looking like that Chihuahua over there. Or, when women, it's like when women get together in this way, you see the beauty of the diversity, and you hold it, because it's too hard for us to hold it by ourselves. And so I think women gathering is critical.
Oh, it makes me want to cry. I'm so grateful, because I did read about your cafe online, and I just thought that is the most extraordinary space, because it's one of the issues we have as well, is that we are an online community. And so this concept of being able to gather has to transform. And so I completely adore the fact that you have opened up and offer this space for women to immerse themselves in a women's circle where they might be really remote and they have no one around them, or they don't have the ability to leave the house because they're single parents, or dad works away, or just what an incredible space you have created.
And I didn't know it was possible. I mean, we create an altar every week. We put an item on the altar to represent something. We have a playlist of songs to listen to that are inspiring and uplifting. So it is a circle, and people create ritual when they, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, they go to the cafe, they might choose to light a candle, is how they get there. So, it's possible. I love that you folks are doing that too.
Well, but I also wanted to say that because, we do have women who say we run sort of courses throughout the year, but women who are seeking that online or in-person experience, it's such a wonderful opportunity that they have to really connect with you and a body of women who can really hold that space of walking into their feminine. I think it's an incredible gift. I really wondered, one of the questions, I have 2 left before we move into our quickfire, is what is it that you wish women who are struggling with food to know?
Well, that is not about the food. But it is a paradox. It's not about the food, and it is about the food. The struggle with food itself is a path to greater consciousness. It will take you where you need to go once you understand it and look at it in a different light. There's a Zen saying that says, don't get stuck looking at the finger pointing to the moon. Look at the moon. So what happens is when you learn to look at it in a different light, you realize that maybe your tendency to binge is pointing you towards where you experience scarcity in your life and where there's never enough. It's not just never enough food, never enough money, never enough time, never enough love, never enough attention. Or if you tend to restrict food, where do you feel that life is too much or you're too much and it's too much to handle? Or if you yo-yo diet or binge and purge, look to see the areas in your life where you just take on too much too quickly, can't assimilate, got to get rid of it. So it's the paradox, is because you put one foot in either world, knowing that the food is just the concrete symbol that is pointing you towards a life beyond your wildest dreams. And I mean that with every fiber in my body. The women I've worked with who have gone this recovery path are extraordinary, and the gifts that they bring to the world are gifts that the world couldn't get any other way. So that's why I continue to do the work I do. People can totally, if they're in a full-blown eating disorder, they can totally, completely recover. If they're struggling with eating or body image difficulties, it's a path to greater consciousness, to embracing the reality and the fullness of who they really are. And it's beautiful.
Oh my goodness, I could listen to you forever. The last question I had was, no, really, what would you wish your own daughters to know about life as a woman, about her body and about her sexuality?
Well, it's your birthright. That it's our birthright to experience our bodies in a pleasurable way. And that includes sexual pleasure, as well as all different kinds of movements. It's precious. It's not all that we are, but it's our bodies are a vehicle to experience life in extraordinary ways. That is our birthright.
It's beautiful. So we have 3 quickfire questions that we always ask people that we interview. Well, the first one is, we have great reverence for, certainly what I'm hearing from you is, when we have these times of great challenge or struggle, that when we're willing to meet it and look at, like you're saying, the foot in each camp, what is that hunger pointing us towards, that we move through these challenging times and we find enormous wisdom on the other side and, break open something new for ourselves in our lives. So I'm wondering if there's a time that you feel comfortable talking about where you were greatly challenged, that in retrospect you really feel into the gratitude for the wisdom and the learning that you gained from that incredibly challenging time.
Wow, there's so many. Let's see. There was a time that I had a terrible boating accident where I almost lost my arm, and it cut up my breast. And obviously I survived. But the lessons from that were extraordinary. Number one, I was told that since I severed the ulnar nerve in my arm, that I would always have a crooked arm, and I wouldn't be able to gain full use of it. And I was very determined that was not going to be the case. So I worked it, and I grew the nerve back. So I learned something about mind over matter and the capacity of the body to heal. And then this may be too much information, but the boat propeller cut off my nipple, and they sewed it back on. And I breastfed both my babies with that breast. Now, how does that happen, right? How do the milk ducts line up, right? Wow. So, it was those experiences that really took me to the wisdom of the body, right? And to this day, when I can't even think of it as a terrible experience because I so value what I learned.
Perfection. Bridget and I love books. We're just wondering, you also being an author and thinking about your journey, is there a particular book or several that you wish every woman in this world have? It can be your own.
It's Mary Woodman. She just passed away this week. She's my hero. She wrote a book called Conscious Femininity. Every woman should read that. Judith Durk, Duerk, wrote Circle of Stones. Every woman should read that book. These books I've read them each probably 100 times. Now, that's not saying much because they're very thin. And with Judith Durk's books, there may be 10 words on a page, but they will penetrate your bones. And both of these books are really about the true essence of the feminine, and they have informed my life profoundly. And the third book that I would recommend is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, I didn't know it when I started graduate school. I walked into this class with this little old man speaking in a very strong accent that I had to work to listen to, but that was Viktor Frankl. And he helped me understand that because he wrote about his experiences in the Nazi prison camp during World War II. He became very famous for this. And this book is one of the greatest books, I think, of our time. But basically, what he learned from that is you can get stripped of everything. Everything you hold dear can be taken away from it, except the meaning you give to your experience. And therein lies your freedom.
Oh. And our last one is, if you could put anything you wanted on a billboard that is going to be on a major highway anywhere in the world, what is it that your billboard would say?
Choose love.
What does that mean for you?
It means that has to do with the meaning you give to any experience, right? You can say, woe is me, or you can say, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. Or you can choose a state of love that will inform you, that will guide you into getting whatever the wisdom is from that experience.
Oh, Anita, I wish you would make grandma.
I am. Just as strong with me, right? We're of the same tribe. That's how we find each other. It's happening all over the world, and we're connecting, right? Look how it's happening. It's very organic and very natural.
So I would really, really love you to explain everywhere that our listeners can reach you and connect with you and connect with your online circle. And we also will pop in the show notes, and certainly this week on our socials as well, is that you've also put forward a blog on the mother archetype, which is beautiful, and that you have an offering for our tribe as well. So would you mind giving us a wrap-up of everywhere we can look more deeply?
Okay, I'm all over the place. So you can find me at my website, DrAnitaJohnston.com, and that will tell you a lot about the workshops that I do, and I do them all over the world. I'll come down under. I'd be happy to. Certainly.
Yeah. Bridget is an amazing events coordinator, so let's really seriously try and do that. Yeah.
I would love that. So that can be found at DrAnitaJohnston.com, and people can contact me there if they want to write to me. I work with people individually online. In fact, I have quite a few people from Australia and New Zealand that I'm working with now that just have different areas in their life they're wanting to explore. And then I have the Light of the Moon Cafe, which is my online platform. And I have a new course that's starting up in August, and it's an interactive course. So I have self-study courses, but the interactive courses are where I hop on every single day for 8 weeks. There's something new every day at the cafe, a poem, a story, audios, videos, and then we talk about it on this forum. And again, we have folks from all over that come, all over the world. It's wonderful women supporting each other in this process. So if anyone's interested, they can just hop on lightofthemooncafe.com and get on the mailing list. And you'll be notified of when that course starts. And also, I'm offering July 30th, I'm releasing a free video series, Soul Hunger, on Soul Hunger. And if you get on the mailing list, you'll get those videos. And also a webinar the first week in August, which is free also. So and then I have my blog that I send out all kinds of different metaphors or just whatever catches my attention. And I just sometimes it's a vlog and I just pull out my selfie and talk about it, or it's a podcast like this one. This one will go out on my mailing list. So lightofthemooncafe.com or DrAnitaJohnston.com. They can reach me there. And now I have a free gift, so anyone can get this, where I talk about how to find the deeper meaning of the foods that you either crave or fear. So how to get to the real hunger beneath them. And it's really kind of fun. And so I have a PDF. If you go to lightofthemooncafe.com/ NM for Nourishing Mother. You can download that. You'll get an email that you can download this PDF.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how to end. Just overwhelming, heartfelt gratitude for what it is you put out in the work. Well, in your work in the world, and your ability to constantly, your drive to constantly show up for women. I think it's incredible, and what a gift. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this. It's what I love.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
We so hope you enjoyed that interview with Anita Johnston. And as she said, she's got a free gift for all of our listeners. So please go to lightofthemooncafe.com/NM for your free video series.
And you can connect with Anita via the links that we'll put in the show notes, as well as all of your usual social media places. So Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Yes. And we should probably say to connect with us.
Yeah, we should. When I come out of my awe bubble.
But we're still kind of there. So.
Is nourishingthemother.com.au. You can connect with us on socials through Instagram and Facebook at Nourishing the Mother. We do really love any of your feedback, your private messages and emails that say, we loved this is amazing, this is happening in my world, this is resonating, and certainly topic suggestions as well. If you'd really like to dive deeper, know what's really happening with Nourishing the Mother during your daily week, we would love you to connect through to our email list. So nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe.
And to connect with you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com, and you, Bridge?
At suburbansandcastles.com.
And as if there was a better podcast in which to say, in order to rock the family, you have to nourish the mother.
Yes.
And this is definitely the case, particularly when we're talking about the mothering or inner mother archetype, which you can also head to our blog where Anita has done a guest blog post on this as well.
Yes.
So we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.